So greetings from Pennsylvania once again, and check out this view behind me. That's the town of Williamsport out there. And it's super windy up here I should say. Back behind me is Route 15. Some of you might know where I am. Right down below us is the West Branch of the Susquehanna River. So we're going to do another episode in our French and Indian War series. It's called The Legend of Cannon Hole. So we're going to make I need to make my way down 15 into Williamsport, up Route 220 here. We're going to look for, I think it's called Mill Road, a boat ramp that's going to take us down to the Susquehanna River, close to the location of Cannon Hole. And down there, I'll tell you the story. I just thought I'd show you up here these beautiful views first. Once again, out there is Williamsport. There's the Susquehanna. Our spot we're headed to is more, it's over that way somewhere. Can't see it too well from here. But during the French and Indian War, the French had rafts, and they rafted down the West Branch of the Susquehanna River from out that way is northwestern Pennsylvania, way out that way somewhere. But eventually got to the Susquehanna here, and they had cannons on those rafts. And they were going to make their way down to Susquehanna to Fort Augusta, which was at the forks of the Susquehanna. But the cannons never made it there, according to the legend. And they're still out there in the Susquehanna. So we're gonna make our way down there in a bit. And now here we are down by the river. We were just up there. Can't quite see the overlook from here, but I think we were a little bit blocked by the trees up there to see down this way. But Williamsport is up that way. But down here is the West Branch of the Susquehanna River. And I believe Cannon Hole is right in there. I think there's an island. There's an island right there that goes by the name of Racetrack or Racecourse Island. At least it used to. Maybe it has different names today, but right in there somewhere is what they call Cannon Hole. But the French would have rafted down from this direction. Not just the French, but they would have had some of the Native Americans with them too. The idea was to attack Fort Augusta, which was held by the British and the colonies. It was a very strategic point in the line of defense for the British. But somewhere around here is where they brought their rafts to a stop, came ashore and made camp. I don't know if they know exactly where that spot was. And with a lot of these stories from back in the day, this dates back to the 1750s, our French and Indian War era, there's different versions of the story. I know when I filmed at Fort Augusta, that's where the forks of the Susquehanna are. It's present-day Sunbury, but across the river there's a place. It's now Shikellamy State Park, but there are some bluffs up along the river, and that's the idea. Is that's where the French went, and they were going to fire their cannons from that spot across the river on Fort Augusta. At least that's what the plan was. And I think when I went there originally, the story I read said that they had brought the cannons all the way with them to across the river from Fort Augusta to those bluffs up there, but then decided that there was too many British troops down there, and that the cannons, they were just smaller brass cannons. They weren't like big, huge, like when you see during the Civil War. This was, quite a bit earlier than that. But then they decided that the cannons wouldn't reach, or the cannonballs wouldn't reach, so they decided to not attack the fort and come back. That's one version of the story. And another version of the story, which I think a viewer mentioned to me in that video, was that the cannons never made it to Fort Augusta. That when they stopped here, when they brought the rafts to a stop here, like I said, they would come from that way, the northwest. That when they stopped here, they just sent a small expedition overland to view Fort Augusta from present-day Fort Shikellamy State Park, those bluffs across the river there. And those fellows then determined that it would not be feasible to bring the cannons there and to attack Fort Augusta because the defenses there were too strong. That seems to be the more likely story. Like there's different versions of it. I had read that they brought the cannons to across the river from Fort Augusta. That's what one story said, but more stories seemed, as I did more research, it seemed more likely that they never took the cannons here. The cannons only came to this spot here and never made it actually to the area of Fort Augusta. Actually, even one story I read said that they actually fired a cannon towards Fort Augusta, and that the cannonball never made it there. So there's all these, that's the way it is with history sometimes in these older records. So why is this called Cannon Hole up here? Well, as the story goes, as the legend says, instead of taking the cannons back with them upriver, back to where they came from northwest Pennsylvania, probably Fort Presque Isle, right down on Lake Erie, they decided to just dump them in the river here and leave them there, you know, instead of taking them back. I think it was like 4 brass cannons. So there was a deep hole up here in the river, and they just dumped them in there, and instead of taking them with them. Which may not make sense at first, but we figure they had to go all the way back upriver. I mean, here the river is nice and wide, but as you go further to the northwest, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And even then, they would have had to have gone overland then back to the French forts. So taking the cannons back, like so they weren't super big ones, but it still would have been a hassle. So I guess they just decided to dump them here. And there's another story I want to bring up here too. I think I mentioned it slightly earlier this summer. I was up. I visited the French forts up in northwestern Pennsylvania, and I mentioned something called the Boon Road. I might bring that up again at the end of this video. There's a mysterious road that the earlier settlers found up in northwestern Pennsylvania. It's probably linked to this story of the Cannon Hole. I'll get to that in a moment. I gotta do more research on that. It's very difficult to find information about it. But yeah. So perhaps back in there, there's some cannons still in the river. And the sun just came out now. Whew, feels good. But yeah, and according to the stories, at times you can still, you know, raft out there, boat out there, and see the cannons. You can look down in the water and see the cannons down in there. But it's been a long time since people say you can see them anymore. But it's kind of interesting. I feel like someone needs to go out there with, not sure how deep the hole is anymore. You know, there might not even be a hole out there anymore. You know, the river, you know, the bottom shifts, the sands and the sediment, maybe it's filled in completely, but it'd be cool to do like a little expedition, underwater expedition, to see if there's cannons are indeed out there. I mean, it won't be that difficult to get here. I mean, I came down, there's a road that comes right down here, there's a boat ramp. Take your scuba gear and go looking for it. I think that would make a pretty neat video. I'm not gonna do it. I don't have scuba gear and I don't know how to scuba dive, so it wouldn't me. But I wouldn't mind like being part of something like that. That would be interesting. Because it would just confirm the legend, and it would just be a really neat piece of history. I mean, they're made of brass. Like they would survive. They'd probably be pretty corroded, but I'm sure there'd be something down there yet. So yeah, that'd be cool to do that. That sun does feel good. It's gonna be like in the 50s today, but this morning was kind of chilly. But that sun just, whew. So yeah, there you go, the legend of Cannon Hole. Just interesting to think that the French and their Native American allies, they camped around here somewhere, deliberating whether or not to attack Fort Augusta or not. And they decided not to. It's one of those things we can stand here and contemplate. You know, what if they did? What if they decided to go forward with the attack? How would that have changed the outcome of the war? You know, could they have taken Fort Augusta? You know, did the people that they sent overland to check it out, was their appraisal of the situation wrong? You know, what if they did go? What if they took those cannons all the way downriver to the forks of the Susquehanna there at Fort Augusta and decided to attack? You know, that would have possibly greatly changed the outcome of the French and Indian War. But that's one of those things with history, is all those what ifs. What if this, what if that? But anyway, there you go, the legend of Cannon Hole. Okay, so I'm actually filming for the next video at this moment, but I need to insert this clip because over here on Canfield Island, just upstream from where we were, they have some information about Cannon Hole, which confirms what we said in the video. That's cool, so let's look at it here. And right here's an information board. The Susquehanna River is right down there. We were earlier, in this video, we were way up that way a ways, but now we're kind of upstream a bit more. But yeah, Cannon Hole, 1757. We were talking about Fort Augusta. There's Canfield Island. This is where we were. I was just a little bit up here in the video. But yeah, like I said, they came down, camped here, then sent some men overland to check out the fort, but then came back and then dumped the cannons there. But yeah, during the French and Indian War, the French sought to assess the strength of British at Fort Augusta, commanding the west and north branches. A group of French soldiers floated along with some Native Americans down the west branch on rafts loaded with cannons and small arms. They tied up near Canfield Island, down where we were, and traveled south along the trail to Fort Augusta. Upon arriving at the British fort, they saw the strength of the enemy and retreated to the rafts. Unable to float the cannons back upstream, the French dumped them into the deep water of the river. The deep water hole has ever since called Cannon Hole. There you go, folks. Hey, so there you go. There's the information we're looking for. I feel like that information should be down at the park where we were at, where Cannon Hole is actually located. This is a group of French soldiers. It was a little bit more than just a group of French soldiers. French soldiers there. So they had Native Americans with them. It was a whole force that was designed to attack the fort. Yeah, it's cool. Anyway, back to the video that I was filming that way. And like I said, someone needs to fund an expedition to go look for those cannons. I just think that'd be super awesome, like I said. But anyway, I'm not really sure that'll happen though. Oh, I want to talk a little bit more about that Boon Road. Yeah, so like I said, in the late 1700s, as the settlers, especially after the French and Indian War, the settlers moved up more into these areas, and they found an old road. Now, when we say road, we don't mean like a modern macadam road. We mean like an old wagon road type thing, kind of like when we did Braddock's Road and Forbes Road during the French and Indian War. But it had nothing to do with the Revolutionary War. It was not made during the Revolutionary War. It was just there. And the Native Americans didn't make roads like that. So who made it? And the idea that some people came up with was that maybe the French built that road, because they would have had to find a way to get from Lake Erie, Presque Isle up there, down to the west branch of the Susquehanna River. So how'd they do that? Well, perhaps they built a wagon road, because they had those cannons with them. So maybe that's what the Boon Road was. Like I said, I want to do a video on that day, do more research on it, trying to find more remnants of that road. But kind of was, there's a book I have that talks about it, but it's been hard to find any of the information about it. But I'm going to work on that. It's an interesting theory. But anyway, just one last look back there up at Cannon Hole. I don't know. I wish I did have the ability to scuba dive and stuff, go look for it. But anyway, maybe someday. Just beautiful views down here. And neat history too. Alright, but that'll be it for the legend of Cannon Hole. From what I read, it seems pretty accurate. Like, this probably is a true story. Like I said, what would really prove it is if we could find those cannons, but anyway. Alright, but that'll be it for this video. I'm going to do some other stuff here in the area, visit some ruins back on that side of the river, a Native American site over there, and some covered bridges too today. So, as always, thanks for coming along, folks. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.